I was in the clinic when my daughter called. We fly tomorrow. I sold your cottage and Dad's bike. Love you. Click. I didn't cry. I unlocked a secret. 3 days earlier, my late husband left me a packet. Inside, deeds, keys, power. By sunset, my daughter got an eviction note from a company she didn't know I own. Who did this to me? She sobbed. I smiled into the storm. Your mother learned to sail. And then the final envelope revealed who forged her name. Hint, not me. I was thumbing a dog-eared boating magazine in the clinic waiting room when my phone buzzed across the laminate like a startled minnow. Brooke never calls this early. Fluorescent lights hummed. A child coughed behind a tissue mountain. The aquarium bubbled its patient blue. I answered anyway, because habit is older than hurt. Her voice slid through the line, clean as glass. Mom, she said. We're flying out tomorrow. I already sold the River Cottage and the Norton. We needed the cash. Love you. The call ended. The screen went black. The room kept breathing. But something in me did not. Knuckles do not scream, but mine whitened, a small storm under skin. The cedar-sided cottage where Len learned to mend our leaks, and I learned patience had gone like a coin into a stranger's palm. His 1,974 Norton Commando, polished every solstice until it winked, was apparently just inventory in my daughter's arithmetic. 43 years of her knowing what those objects held inside them, summers, salt, forgiveness, and using them like chips on a table I never sat at. I looked at the aquarium and told my voice to stand up. I'll be fine, I whispered to the bubbles, to Len, to myself. I made a decision so quiet it felt like slipping a boat off its mooring at dawn. Breathe, remember, move. A week before he died, Len had pressed a manila packet into my hands and said, "Open when you're ready." He was a longshoreman who believed in knots you could trust and instructions that waited without impatience. Grief had left it buried under paperwork and casseroles, but the sentence surfaced after Brooke's call like a buoy. "Ready," I told the room. The nurse called my name, then called someone else's. I left without being seen. At home, the wood floor remembered our feet, and the windows remembered where the rain likes to gather. I set the packet on the kitchen table, the scarred pine that has heard more truth than any church pew, and slid a butter knife under the flap. Deeds to marina lots, maps of thin parking strips along the inlet. Preferred shares in a tug company with a name that tastes like salt, an operating agreement for Lighthouse Commons LLC naming me sole manager, and Len's letter in his patient block letters. We were always rich in water and time. Now you're rich on paper too. Keep it quiet, or our girl will turn love into leverage. My fingers shook, not from fear, but from the strange weight of a door opening where I had thought only wall existed. He had been building this harbor for years while sipping coffee beside me, pretending to read the tide charts while he read people. I laid the papers in a careful fan, then stacked them again. Invisible power is still power. And I understood why he kept it quiet. If Brooke had known, she would have loved the number, not the hands that made it. I breathed and said out loud, "All right, Captain." The room steadied. I needed a compass that could read law as easily as I read weather. I dialed attorney Priya Menon from our old rotary because I wanted the sound of a real ring. She answered on the second chime. "Mrs. Hale, I'm sorry for your loss," she said, voice like a level table. "Bring everything. We'll check the teeth of each document." I told her what Brooke had done, what Len had left, what I wanted, to fix what could be fixed without turning my daughter into an enemy. Priya listened, then said, "Authority is the difference between a sale and a story." I wrote the sentence down like a vow. A gray curtain of rain was strolling in from the harbor when I headed across the street to Yolanda's porch. She keeps a salon in the front room and a counseling service in the kitchen, both paid in gossip and pound cake. I held the packet to my chest. She opened the screen door before I knocked. "Noreen," she murmured, "you're walking like you already know the ending." I smiled because prophecy is just a good memory in disguise. "Maybe I do," I said. "Maybe the ending's a beginning." Yolanda poured coffee and watched me breathe. "Some storms don't need umbrellas, they need ballast," she said. "Be your own keel." In Priya's office the next morning, we spread the papers like harbor charts and labeled the shoals. She tapped the operating agreement with her pen. Your daughter had no authority to sell the cottage. That sale can be unwound. The motorcycle, we can chase. The tower where she lives, Lighthouse Commons, owns the land and the master lease. The words sat on the table like clean tools. I exhaled. And if I wanted to stay invisible? I asked. Then we work in the company's name, Priya said, and we move without a splash. Len always said tides, not tantrums. I nodded. Quiet, then, I told her. Quiet and precise. I walked home through a fine drizzle that made the streetlights look kind. My plan felt simple in the bones. Keep the mask of a widow who counts coupons, marshal the assets without spectacle, let consequences speak in standard font, not in shouting. I would not call Brooke. My voice would only become the net she thinks she outgrew. I would not gloat. I would cook, sweep, and sign. In the hallway mirror, I practiced the face of a woman who is surviving, which is not a lie. Then I whispered to Len, currents, not oars. This is a current. The house seemed to agree. I stripped Brooke's old room as if I were turning down a bed for a paying guest, then put back what mattered. The faded fairy poster she loved at 9, the quilt my mother stitched with crooked stars, a lamp that makes warm circles on cool nights. I set a new toothbrush in the bathroom and folded towels that still remember her shape. Preparing is not permission, I told myself. It is mercy for future hours. I brewed tea and let it steep too long, the way Len liked it, and listened to rain scuff across the roof like small feet looking for a place to stop. I thought of Len sitting at this same table with his boots unlaced, telling me there are 2 ways to steer, yank and drift. Yank looks brave, he'd say, but drifting with the current you chose is the real muscle. He never raised his voice, even when the world did. If I loved Brooke, I would not yank. I would not humiliate. I would teach. There is a difference between punishment and consequence, between spectacle and settlement. Authority, Priya said. The word tasted like clean iron. I tucked the documents into fresh folders and slid them into the pantry beside the flour, safe as bread. I called Priya back to fix a time. I chose the earlier one because morning light forgives. I packed the packet, Len's letter, and a notebook. Before leaving, I stood by the aquarium at the clinic in my mind and repeated the sentence that steadied me when Brooke cut the line. I'll be fine. I was speaking to the bubbles, to Len, to the part of me that loves without rules. Outside, gulls tilted against the weather. Inside, I wrote a final note, quiet and precise or nothing. Then I locked the door. Priya's email landed with the tidy certainty of a stamp on damp paper. The cottage transfer was unauthorized and could be unwound without spectacle. The Nortons' title trail was warm. Lighthouse Commons could revest what mattered and tighten what had been left to fray. She suggested we meet again, not for grand gestures, but for signatures that behave themselves. I put on Len's old windbreaker because it smells faintly of rope and rain, and today I needed both. In her office, we did not speak of grief. We spoke of procedure. Priya stacked my documents into 3 patient towers. Tower 1 is the rescission, she said. We'll tender a clean unwind to the buyer, no blame in the language, just a return to status quo. If they protest, we escalate. Tower 2 is the Norton, a notice to the DMV, a request for the bill of sale, light investigator work. Tower 3 is control banking authority, leases, collection protocols. You don't have to raise your voice, Mrs. Hale. Paper is louder than shouting. Then let it be paper, I said. I won't drag her. I will let gravity teach. She nodded. We'll move as if in a library, every sound measured. Business, not betrayal. I signed where she pointed and initialed where she tapped. Each pen scratch felt like a stitch, closing something I didn't know was bleeding. There is a mercy in deadlines. They move the day forward even when your heart wants to sit on the curb, holding its knees. Outside, the harbor breathed its weather into the streets. People hurried under hoods. I practiced the slower walk of a woman who adds up prices before placing items in her cart. The mask would be a kind of costume, yes, but not a lie about sorrow. I would accept help I didn't need because accepting would teach me how help looks when you aren't proud enough to refuse it. I would speak in shorter sentences. I would take the bus more. I would allow rumor to do its easy, useful work. At the grocer, I bought beans with the store brand label and a sack of rice as heavy as my left hip. The clerk flicked her eyes to my ring, then to the beans. "We're double stamping loyalty cards for seniors this week," she said, careful not to say widow. I smiled and thanked her, collecting an extra box of tea I didn't need. I am not ashamed of deception when its purpose is education. I am frightened of the quick pleasure of being right. I refuse to let hurt rewrite me. At home, I laid out lists like a nautical chart. Unwind the cottage sale without theater. Ask Priya to front the conversation through Lighthouse Commons so no Hale voice enters the room. Trace the Norton. Prepare an offer to the buyer that compensates inconvenience without rewarding insult. Centralize control of Lighthouse Commons. Bank signatories, vendor approvals, rent rolls, insurance binders, reserves. Review leases in the tower, not to punish, to understand. Watch and wait. I did not call Brooke. A phone call would only rearrange furniture. The foundation needed pouring. In the afternoon, Priya's paralegal sent a draft compliance notice for the tower. It was clean and dignified, a reminder of obligations, a request for updated information, 30 days to cure. Nothing in the text scolded. "This reads like rain," I wrote back. "Necessary, impartial," Priya replied. "Good. Impartial weather grows things." I approved service without adding a single adjective. Yolanda arrived with a thermos of chicory and the kind of stare that takes the measure of both your pulse and your pantry. We sat at my table, elbows touching like old oars. "You look steady," she said. "I'm tying knots." "Make sure it's rope, not your own throat." "I hear you." I poured for both of us. "I'm going to look poor for a while." "You'll look patient," she corrected. "Silence isn't surrender, it's weathering. Just don't vanish inside your good intentions." "You'll pull me out by the ear if I try." "You're not too old for it." We laughed, which tasted like a reprieve. Then I told her only what I could tell, a thimble of truth. That there were papers, that there were options, that there would not be public scenes. She approved with a single proud nod and braided the air into something sturdy with her next sentence. "Hurt tempts us to perform. Don't, do the work, and let the work be the story." When she left, I opened new accounts under Lighthouse Commons and moved reserves into buckets with names like maintenance, legal, vacancy, because money like grief behaves better when you tell it where to sit. I reviewed the rent rolls Priya had pulled and circled 3 units with late fees that felt more like life than malice. I instructed the property manager to waive them this month without announcement. Mercy does not always need a witness. I also drafted rules for myself, written on an index card I stuck inside the pantry door. Do not justify. Do not gloat. Do not rescue early. Never lie about love. Sleep. When fatigue came, I let it have me. At dusk, I wiped the counter twice, though it was already clean, and set a single plate at the edge of the table, not because I expected company, but because I wanted readiness to be an object in the room. I slid Len's letter back into its envelope and put it on the highest shelf I can reach without a step stool, right beside the holiday platters. Some truths belong with ritual. The next morning, Priya called with the voice of good news, wearing a neutral coat. Notice of rescission delivered. Buyer agreed to meet us halfway, refund within 5 business days in exchange for a small stipend for their search and the movers they'd pre-booked. I kept your name out of it. "Thank you," I said. "I don't want Victory to make an orphan out of my daughter." "We don't do Victory," she said. "We do restoration." "And the Norton?" "An enthusiast bought it for less than it's worth. He's local. We will make him whole for his trouble and retrieve the motorcycle without a sour taste. I'll handle tone." "Please do. I don't want Len's joy arriving by tow truck. We'll bring it home warm if we can." After the call, I printed the compliance notice and, for reasons I cannot defend, ran my fingertip over the Lighthouse Commons letterhead. It felt like a gate you open with a quiet shoulder. I authorized service to all units, Brooks among them, without any special instruction. The doorman would do his job, the elevator would do its job, the paper would do its job. My job was to stay still and steady. I made my house into an instrument of stillness. I oiled the hinges that complain out loud. I replaced the batteries in the smoke alarms because emergencies tempt fate. I practiced saying, I don't know when I know many things, and let me think when my answer is already loaded. If Brooke came, she would find a mother who could be leaned against but not leaned on in the way that breaks both people. In the afternoon, I took the bus to the county building because I wanted to look at the recorder's office with my own old eyes. The lobby smelled like paper and raincoats. People waited for numbers to light on a screen. At the counter, a clerk with a neat bun took my forms and smiled at my deliberate penmanship. "Not many folks print like this anymore," she said. "It's how my husband wrote," I told her. "Straight lines when the world didn't have any." "Those were the days," she said, stamping the corner with a thud that felt like a drum beat. We were not friends. We were two women getting a job done without flourishing. It pleased me more than it should have. On the way home, I saw, in a florist's window, a sign that said, "We deliver to Docks." Len would have loved the literal kindness of it. I bought myself a single fern and carried it in the crook of my arm like a freshly learned word. That night, the neighborhood gave me my own rumor in return for the ones I let stand. At the mailbox, a man I barely know said, "Heard about your daughter's big trip, Europe or Asia? Those startup things?" I pretended to search my pockets for keys I already held. "Young people," I said, as if I'd been born old. He laughed and kept walking. I went inside and set the fern beside the sink, where it could eavesdrop on dishwater and secrets. I wrote a letter I did not send. "Brooke, I am not angry in the way you think. I am angry in the way a coastline is angry, unyielding, shaped by tides it didn't choose. You can crash or you can harbor. I will be here, as rock and rope, but I won't be a dock you burn and rebuild at will." Then I tore the page and dropped the pieces into the compost, where even unmailed truth can do some good. Before bed, I stood before Len's photo and said what I had not said all day. Fast water runs quiet. I promised him I would be that water. I turned off the lamp and let the room be dark enough to think in. By morning, the plan had the engine of habit: coffee, a short walk, a check of Priya's updates. She had filed a bland, beautiful packet with the Tower Management Lighthouse speaking to Lighthouse in the language of minutes and attachments. She had scheduled a status call with me for Friday, not because there was drama, but because time likes a fence to lean on. She had also sent a simple ledger for Lighthouse Commons, showing what was coming in and where it would go. I printed it and tucked it into my recipe box under biscuits, because nothing should be too far from comfort. The last thing I did before the day turned noisy was set a timer on my phone for 30 minutes, the length of my resolve when it is least brave, and I sat at the table and did nothing but breathe. When the timer chimed, I said out loud, into the empty kitchen and the patient fern, "I won't humiliate her. I'll educate her." The words didn't feel like a plan anymore. They felt like a promise I could keep whether or not anyone clapped. Priya's final email of the day arrived just before supper. Compliance notices served. Rescission in motion. Norton retrieval scheduled. All communications issued under Lighthouse Commons. I replied with 2 words that carried the weight of a harbor and the humility of a broom. Proceed quietly. Then I washed a single plate, dried it with the corner of a towel that still carries blackberry stains from a summer I'd like to keep, and slid it into the cupboard like a prayer returning to its proper shelf. 3 weeks is a long time to hold your breath, long enough for porch paint to peel into little moons, for gulls to memorize your stride, for grief to feel like a sweater you can't quite take off. On the 3rd Thursday, Yolanda leaned over my fence with her shears glinting. "Saw your girl at the tower last night," she said, voice half whisper, half siren. 1 suitcase, no husband, eyes like she slept in them. I didn't answer, because words aimed at a daughter have a way of finding her. I just topped off her thermos and swept the steps until the grain remembered me. At 10, the bell stuttered like a nervous public speaker. I opened the door to Brooke, standing smaller than her clothes, rain lathering her lashes. She tried on a smile that didn't fit and said, "Mom." 1 word, heavy as a suitcase. I stepped aside. The house made room in the old way. She tracked the familiar yard sale rug like a map she used to hop, blue parts river, brown parts safe ground. In the kitchen, she wrapped both hands around a mug and held it like a boat holds heat. "Damien stayed," she blurted. "New visa, new cohort, new everything. I came back because my cards are frozen and the bank won't talk to me on hotel Wi-Fi, and the doorman had to let me into the apartment because my fob," she swallowed. There was a letter on the floor, from a company called Lighthouse Commons, something about compliance. She attempted a laugh, built a cough. "Is that bad?" "It's business," I said, setting a spoon exactly on a saucer so my hand had a job. "Business doesn't hate you, it just doesn't love you," she cried then, 16 seconds flat. Pride's free allotment before penalties accrue. When the tears stopped, she stared at the far wall as if a train schedule might appear there. "Could I just for a little until I can? Shame is a seam ripper." Good sentences came apart. "You can stay," I said. "There will be rules. You'll do your own laundry. You won't lie to me or to yourself while you're under my roof. You won't borrow a future you can't repay. You'll sleep, eat, and tell me the truth on even days." The corner of her mouth lifted. "Even days," she said, like truth could be put on the calendar. She left after lunch to fetch what's left. When she returned, she set 2 suitcases, a garment bag, and a soft-sided box on the table. The box breathed out old paper smell, receipts, a chipped frame, a candle pretending to be ocean. At the bottom lay a smaller manila envelope face down, like a dealer signaling a new hand. Brooke flipped it over and frowned. "My name in Len's patient block letters, Noreen. Found this with Damien's papers," she said. "What is it?" I knew the feel of Len's envelopes the way I know the harbor's moods. Inside, taped to an index card, sat a tiny brass key and one line, Box 247, Downtown Branch. "When you are ready to help her, open this." Brooke read over my shoulder, uninvited like a child before bedtime. "Help me," she repeated, as if the verb were a spell. "We'll go in the morning," I said. "Tonight you bathe and eat. Sleep upside down if it helps your heart drain." "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Probably not," I said. "But love isn't a paycheck." We took the bus because timetables teach humility. The bank smelled like carpet and weather reports. A woman in a navy suit examined my ID and the key, her politeness deepening by one shade when my name matched the ledger. In the vault, a room the size of a careful thought, she set box 247 on felt and left us alone. The lid rose with the weight of the past, not the present. Inside were numismatic coins in plastic sleeves labeled in Len's tidy hand dates, mint marks, notes that sounded like modest pride. Good luster, honest wear. Beside them lay 3 vintage chronographs in pouches, their crystals polished, their straps supple like well-kept promises. Each had a slender envelope, provenance, repairs, the jeweler's address, a penciled estimate stingy enough to be believable. I heard Len's voice. "If it still ticks, it deserves its history." Brooke touched a watch the way you test a pulse. "This could get us out," she breathed. "The us found my ribs and knocked. It can get us breathing," I said. "Out is a longer voyage." The banker reappeared with the courtesy of someone whose lunch lives in a 26-minute window. "Would you like appraisals?" she asked. "We recommend it before any sale." "Yes," I said, "and copies of the contents list. We inventoried." Len had written in pencil values he thought fair and warnings I could hear him speak. "Never sell under pressure. 1 watch bore, for our girl, if she ever learns time." Brooke's face moved through surprise into something like humility. "He left this for me?" "For us," I said. "For me to use to help you, when I'm ready." She closed her mouth before pride could make a speech. We signed the log. I lifted 1 watch and a sleeve of coins into an envelope, cash flow to calm emergencies, and left the rest where it belonged, waiting without impatience. On the bus back, cranes moved containers like slow-motion chess. Brooke pressed her forehead to the glass. "I don't know how to be this person," she said. "The one who needs help. The one who reads fine print. The one who says no." I kept my hands folded to keep from braiding her hair like I used to before field trips. "Then you practice," I said. "Learning is repetition with fewer excuses." She nodded, a tiny bow toward the future. That night she filled the house with steam and the clean animal sound of someone eating without apology. After dishes, she lingered in the doorway like a kid caught by streetlights. "I'm sorry," she said, the words pressed flat by travel and pride. "Not just for the money, for how I spoke to you, for treating you like storage, not shelter. You picked your words, I said gently. Now you're picking them up. She swallowed. I'm scared. That's a good sign, I said. Only liars aren't. She huffed a laugh and went to bed in sweatpants that used to mean leisure and now meant survival. In my room, I opened a small envelope tucked beneath the watch's Len's extra note. Nore, he wrote. If the girl comes light, give her a room. If she comes heavy, give her a list. The box is not for panic. The box is for pivot. Teach her the difference. I touched his name with a kiss off my fingertip. I remember, I said to the quiet. Morning brought arithmetic. Over coffee, Brooke spread her debts like a chart. Those with collateral, those with penalties that bite, the whispering ones that pretend to be small until they grow teeth. The bank keeps saying, "We sympathize, Mrs. Leclerc," she muttered. Sympathy doesn't lower a rate. It sometimes buys time, I said. Time is money when you're not burning it. She straightened, the old event planner posture repurposed for honesty. What do we sell first? Not we, I said. You. I'll stand beside you. At the appraisal, a banker with a tie softer than his voice said, Coins love patience. Watches love the right buyer. You'll net more if you're not in a hurry. Life rarely honors that. Brooke took notes in a free brochure's margins because pride was too tired to hold the pen. He slid a folder across the table. Recommended channels, he said. No pressure. I thanked him. Manners compound interest. Outside, her phone chimed. She handed it to me like a white flag. She didn't trust her eyes. A compliance reminder from Lighthouse Commons. Neutral as weather, 30 days to update documents. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Is Lighthouse Commons bad? It's business, I said, letting my dish towel voice rest on the words. She searched my face for an angle and found a harbor instead. At home, I labeled a folder breathing and filed appraisal notes inside. I taped a list to the pantry door above the flower. Call Priya. Schedule sale. Keep one watch. Keep one story. Keep one promise. Brooke read over my shoulder. Keep one promise? That I won't abandon you, I said. And I won't lie to make you feel better. She nodded, then rolled up her sleeves and stood at the sink. We worked in companionable clatter. Without looking up, she asked, Mom, is Lighthouse Commons bad? It's business, I repeated, because some truths need echoes. She touched the envelope with the watch we'd chosen to sell. These could save us. They can buy time, I said. Saving is different. After she went to her room, I sat with Len's letter and the brass key between my palms like a sacrament. The house exhaled the way houses do when they know who's inside. Outside, foghorns counted breaths. I texted Priya 2 words we'd agreed meant momentum without spectacle. Proceed triage. Then I set Len's unsold watch on my nightstand and listened until its ticking taught my own breath to behave. We laid the contents of box 247 on the table like stars we were naming, coins in their little sleeves, watches in their felt nests, Len's penciled notes like a soft voice saying, not yet, not under pressure. Brooke traced a circle across the plastic with her fingertip and cleared her throat. If we don't move, the interest keeps multiplying, she said. If we do move too fast, we lose value. She looked at me the way she used to when a math problem offered 2 wrong answers that still had to be ranked. So we move, I said, but we don't run. She nodded and folded a legal pad open, drawing 3 columns. Must pay, can wait, wants to scare you. Under must pay, she wrote the bank with the collateral clause. Under wants to scare you, she wrote the lender who texted in all caps. He gets quiet when he hears the word counsel, I said, and Brooke smiled without joy. Then he can meet her, she answered, meaning Priya. We started with a small mercy, the least rare of the coins, Len's penciled estimate conservative enough to pass any appraiser's sniff test. The dealer peered through a loop like a man trying to be impressed without letting you see it. Nice luster, he said, which sounded like hello in his dialect. He named a number lower than the one on Len's envelope. Brooke didn't flinch. We'll keep looking, she said, polite as a bell. On the sidewalk, she shook out her fingers like an athlete. I thought I'd be the one to crumple, she admitted. Turns out I like walking away more than I like being taken. That's a sentence you can build a life around, I told her. and we did not go back. The second shop smelled faintly of lemon oil and old stories. An older woman slid the sleeves under a soft light and hummed, not a tune, just a line of approval. Her number met Len's pencil, like two hands finding each other in a crowd. Brooke signed the slip and did not look back. I watched the money move into the account we had named Breathing and felt something inside my chest, set down a box it had been carrying up the same staircase for months. "This isn't salvation," I said. "It's oxygen." "Oxygen is underrated," Brooke answered, and we both laughed, the kind of laugh that knows better. The watches were harder. A young man in a white glove tried to talk us into Shortcuts, the platform that pays in 30 minutes but keeps half the magic, the buyer who doesn't fuss about provenance. Brooke listened, thanked him, then turned to me. "We wait for the right wrists," she said. I asked why, not to test her, but to hear the music of the answer. "Because Dad would rather have them worn by someone who notices the second hand," she replied, and I gave her the envelope with the least special of the three. We left the other two scheduled for a private showing next week, prayer disguised as patience. At home, the debt map bent a little in the right direction. Brooke called the first bank and spoke in the new voice she was building, low, steady, factual. "I'm not disputing the balance," she said. "I'm documenting fraud on adjacent accounts and requesting a brief pause to route payments in the correct order." She listened for a long time. "Yes," she said finally. "A week buys a life." When she hung up, she sagged, then straightened, then wrote the date in the column labeled, "Promises That Matter." Her phone buzzed, the all-caps lender again. She read, rolled her eyes, and hit forward to Priya with a single line, "Please advise tone." Priya wrote back almost instantly, "Neutral, 2 sentences. Our counsel will respond. Do not contact this number again." That afternoon, Brooke put on her oldest sneakers and an expression I recognized, the one that says a person is going to do something they once thought beneath them and will be better for it. The Science Museum's HR office smelled like copier heat and optimism. The night facilities supervisor, Kofi Mensah, shook her hand and looked her in the eye with a kindness that wasn't pity. "We start with a walk," he said. He showed her the planetarium, floors hate stardust, the children's gallery, stickiness is a philosophy here, and the freight elevator, never argue with an elevator, you'll lose. He handed her a clipboard and a pair of gloves. "2 kinds of pride," Kofi said, leaning one shoulder against a door jamb. "The kind that keeps you from scrubbing, and the kind you feel when the floor shines because you made it shine." Brooke nodded like someone getting a blessing she didn't know she had requested. "I'd like the second kind," she answered. "Good," Kofi said. "We sell it cheap, but it costs everything." While Brooke walked her new territory, I met Priya for coffee in the lobby of her building because I wanted the echo of glass and stone to teach my voice restraint. She had 2 folders, one blue, one gray. "Blue is the cottage," she said. "We've tendered rescission in the most boring language possible. Gray is the motorcycle, DMV notices, inquiry to the buyer, a draft of a pleasant letter." She smiled with the corner of her mouth. I included a line about the Norton being a family heirloom. Even people who don't care about families care about heirlooms. I shook my head. "You're ruthless, Priya." "I'm procedural," she corrected. "And procedure is your friend." I let the words land where I keep the good china. In the evening, Brooke's first shift ended with a stack of compostable trays and a pair of damp socks she wrung out over the tub. She sat on the edge of the sink and laughed, an exhausted, delighted sound. "I didn't die," she said. "I aligned a trash bag without tearing it on the first try. I learned the route the vacuum cord wants to take. I met a kid who said, 'Thank you for making the museum smell like oranges.' And I sweated like a person who belongs to her own body again. I handed her a glass of water. 'You're shining,' I said. She rolled her eyes. 'It's just the cleaner.' 'No,' I said. 'It's the work.' 2 days later, Priya forwarded a packet labeled Publicly Sourced Communications, screenshots and downloads she'd acquired with nothing but the internet and her patience. Emails from Damien to a woman with a neat signature in a language he does not speak fluently, proposing a residency partnership in exchange for mutual administrative benefits. The timestamps shimmered like a shoreline on a hot day. One read 9/12 a.m. Thursday, Chiang Mai time. Another read 10:1 a.m. Thursday. Our time his message to Brooke, telling her to sign the quick sale documents for the cottage so we can be liquid. My chest did a slow, cold turn. "You left before you took, didn't you, Damien?" I said to the ceiling, because some indictments are best spoken where only paint can hear. Priya's note beneath the packet was dry enough to sand furniture. This is, in my view, an anomaly that will not survive cross-examination. When the standard 30-day notice prepared by Lighthouse Commons went out to all tower residents, it traveled the same way weather does without a grudge. The property manager sent me the service affidavit with the same punctuation he uses for maintenance reports. "Neutral tone?" I asked Priya. "Neutral tone," she confirmed. "No drama, policy, expectations, cure period. It reads like barometric pressure," I said, and she laughed once, pleased. "Good. Barometers don't sue." The rescission on the cottage moved with the grace of a machine built to be kind. The buyers, a retired couple who had thought they were lucky, returned keys and received a stipend for movers without seeing my name, and the cottage came back to me like a dog that remembers its whistle. The Nortons' buyer wrote a careful email full of apology and attachment to a thing that was never really his. "Tell him we will make him whole," I told Priya, "but ask whether we can send someone who will ride it home. You don't want a flatbed," she guessed. "I want the engine warm when it returns," I said. She wrote back later that a man from the tug company would do the honors on Saturday. "Ties to your shares," she added, for a little circular poetry. Len would have approved of the geometry. Brooke's second week at the museum included a birthday party that erupted into confetti like a cheerful crime. She came home with paper stars in her hair and the kind of laugh that makes you want to pay it forward. "Kofi says the trick is to sweep as if you're teaching the broom where the floor lives," she reported. "He also says you can tell how someone was raised by whether they stack their trays." I asked how she was raised, and she smirked. By a woman who liked her counters clean and her stories cleaner. We shared a look that made both of us blink for different reasons. We scheduled the private watch showing for a small circle of collectors who send thank you notes for the privilege of paying too much. It was held in a room with velvet trays and a man who knew how to say chronograph without making the word sound expensive. Brooke answered questions with data rather than adjectives, and I watched buyers look at her with a respect they save for people who have already buried a luxury and come back militant about function. One watch sold for more than Len's pencil would have allowed. The buyer kissed his own wrist after fastening it, as if promising fidelity to time itself. "Good wrist," Brooke murmured to me, and I felt Len's pride move through the air like heat. Money entered, breathing in careful wires and left in calmer checks. The first bank removed an ugly clause from a letter after Priya pointed a small flashlight at the part of the statute it had been misquoting. The all-caps lender sent one more message, then none, after receiving Priya's two-sentence response. The password Brooke used to check her accounts changed from something that bragged to something that prayed. She brought home a plastic clamshell of pre-cut fruit and set it on the counter like confetti. "We're okay," she said, relief softening her face into something closer to the child who used to climb into my lap with salt in her hair. "For tonight," I answered, and kissed the top of her head because some victories need a blessing and a boundary in the same breath. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. The cottage was ours again. The motorcycle was headed home under a gray sky that always looks romantic in a rearview mirror. Brooke was learning a new alphabet made of mops and degrees, of invoices and apologies. The anomaly I kept folded in my pocket like a live wire waited for its day in a room where judges like puzzles. I wanted to run downstairs and make a chart with all the arrows pointing toward better, but Len's voice said, "Tides, not tantrums." So I turned over and let the watch on my nightstand tick the dark into something you could stand on. In the morning, Yolanda leaned on the fence and squinted at my face. "You look like someone who found the right wrench," she said. "Maybe just the right nut," I answered, and we both snorted like teenagers. She asked about Brooke's new job without asking about Brooke's old life. I told her about oranges and confetti and trays. She nodded. "Work that makes you tired where sleep can help, that's the good kind." "What's the bad kind?" I asked. "The kind that makes you tired where sleep can't reach," she said, and pressed a grocery sack into my hands. Inside, a loaf of bread and something wrapped in wax paper that turned out to be courage disguised as cake. By the week's end, the museum had the clean gleam of a place loved by invisible hands. The cottage had its curtains drawn to the exact angle Len liked at dusk, and our ledger had numbers that looked less like a threat and more like a plan. Priya sent one last note before the weekend. Next phase, document collation for formal defense. Keep receipts. Keep calm. I replied with the 2 words we'd made our creed: proceed quietly. Then I wrote a line on a sticky note and stuck it to the inside of my cupboard door, right above the teacups we use on even days. Preparation is love with a clock. A letter arrived the way weather turns yesterday's compliance printing itself into today's eviction. The doorman handed it to Brooke with the same neutrality he'd offer a menu, and the elevator brought her up like a verdict. She didn't knock. She let the door bounce and barreled into my kitchen with paper trembling between both hands. "They're pushing me out," she said. "The company is called Lighthouse Commons," I finished gently. She stared. "You know them?" "I know Harbors," I said. It wasn't a lie. It was only a smaller truth than the one screaming to be told. She leaned against the counter, the letter flat under her palm as if pressure could reverse ink. The words "Notice to vacate" sat on top like frost. I poured tea because boiling water is still the best first aid for panic. She didn't drink. She read, reread, then slid the paper toward me the way a patient slides an X-ray, begging the bones to change. Her phone buzzed as if it had been listening. Damien's reply to her last plea was a smear dressed as philosophy. "We're on different paths. Attachment is the enemy of growth." She read it and went hollow in the eyes, the way a house looks after furniture leaves. She set the phone face down like a small coffin. "He thinks detachment is enlightenment," she said. "He thinks accountability is gravity you can ignore." She folded the notice into thirds with surgical neatness, then pulled on her museum shoes. "Kofi says make it shine," she said. "I'm taking the second shift." That night I heard the sofa spring sigh when she returned, and there was no scrolling glow under her door. Morning brought Yolanda with her scissors idle, the porch air smelling of wet rope and coffee. She watched Brooke leave for the bus and then turned to me. "You're letting the lesson burn a little," she said. "A little," I answered. "Don't cook your own heart to teach somebody else to taste," she warned. I smiled because it was the kind of sentence you can lean against when the day leans back. "I'm measuring the flame," I said. She peered into my face the way a mother checks a fever. "Good," she said. "Remember to eat." She pressed a foil-wrapped slice of something sweet into my hand, and the porch felt less like a dock and more like a kitchen again. By afternoon, the mail made a small mountain, bland envelopes with sharp corners, late fees blooming like mold, a utilities courtesy reminder for the tower that didn't yet know it was running out of Brooke. A vendor still owed her for a cancelled gala, claiming force majeure, as if weather had plotted the betrayal. I stacked and budgeted. Breathing could handle 2, the third would have to stare at me a while. Losses weren't only numbers. Brooke sold a sequin dress that once made her feel invincible. She came home lighter and a little ashamed. "Armor that can be pawned isn't armor," she said. I put the kettle on, because every loss deserves steam. Priya's filings moved faster than fear. She scheduled Brooke for signatures at noon, choosing a conference room with windows too honest to allow melodrama. "This is a narrow power of attorney for defense only," she said, sliding the document across. "It lets me speak to institutions on your behalf, and only for the purpose of undoing what was done to you." Brooke's pen hesitated at the fee paragraph. "I can't afford. My fees are covered," Priya said, calm as a stamp. "By a client with an interest in justice." Brooke looked at me, searching my face for either pride or pity. I stirred my tea, which is how I tell the truth without performing it. "Sign," I said. "Let the grown-ups fight the paperwork." She signed, then exhaled like a window opening. Back at the house, Brooke unfolded a calendar and counted days out loud like a person training a heartbeat. The notice gave 30, the eviction letter gave 14 more after failure to cure. She wrote both numbers in red, then added her museum schedule in pencil around them, as if work could braid itself through worry and keep it from unspooling. "They're pushing me out," she said again, not because I hadn't heard her, but because the sentence needed to hear itself. "Then you, my girl, will learn to push back the right way," I answered, giving her the anchor of a tone I once saved for parent-teacher meetings in rough water. She smiled without teeth. "The right way," she repeated, and returned to her clipboard like a soldier tying his boots. The counterattack came in practical shoes. A bank placed a hold pending investigation on a joint account that was mostly imaginary anyway. Still, the email bruised. The catering company from the aborted gala refused her final invoice, brand disruption, as if honesty were the scandal. 2 clients ghosted. A cousin texted, "Heard you're moving, so exciting." Brooke deleted it and went back to scrubbing wine stains older than her marriage. That night she posted nothing. She listed 3 designer heels on a resale site and wrapped them in brown paper, while Kofi's sentence hummed, "Make it shine." The doorman called to confirm service of the letter, voice identical to the one he uses for flowers. Procedure everywhere, sympathy nowhere. I kept my mask on with pins and prayer. I took the bus in the rain and let my coat remember other storms. I bought store-brand beans, though I could have bought the aisle. I folded coins into the jar by the stove, even while checks sat quiet in a lighthouse account with my name on it. I almost told her one night when she came home with a blister and a grin. My mouth opened. Then Yolanda's warning rose like a lifeguard. "Don't cook your own heart." I closed my mouth, cut bread, asked about the planetarium and the confetti. "Never argue with an elevator," she said, and we laughed because Kofi was right twice. Priya called from a number saved in my phone as Harbor. 2 updates, she said. First, the bank that froze the joint account has agreed to a temporary release for documented living expenses. Second, I've prepared notices to the private lenders clarifying representation. They are to contact me, not your daughter. She asked Brooke to stop by after work to sign 2 more forms and review a script for answering calls. Name, counsel, end call. In the conference room, Priya looked Brooke in the eyes the way bridges look at rivers. "Defense only. No more blank checks for anyone," she said. Brooke nodded like a student who for once liked the lesson. On the way out, she whispered, "How are you getting paid?" Priya smiled. "Well." The elevator doors met with that soft courthouse thud that always sounds like fairness. That evening, a mutual friend posted a photo of Damien leading a workshop on a beach captioned, "Unattachment is love. No tag, no names, just the kind of performance that counts on people to fill in the blanks." Brooke saw it because the algorithm loves salt. She didn't comment. She put her phone in the drawer with the takeout menus and went to iron her work pants with the travel iron we keep for weddings. "If I have to be a story," she said, not looking up, "I'll be the kind where the ending is a shift well covered." I stood in the doorway and watched steam lift from fabric like a small weather system, choosing decency over drama. 2 nights later, over eggs and toast eaten at the wrong hour, she cleared her throat. "Mom, can I stay here through the quarter?" she asked. "I want to finish out at the museum, not flake on a team. After that, if the filings work, I'll sort housing without drama." The sentence was so un-Brooke I almost gave the game away, almost opened the pantry and handed her every ledger with my name at the top. Instead, I reached for the sugar and brushed her shoulder in the same movement, letting touch say what speech could ruin. "Yes," I said. "You have a room and a key. Pay rent by being honest and kind." She nodded, eyes bright but steady. "I can do both," she said. "I may have to practice." "Practice is grace," I answered, and the kitchen believed me. Before bed, I reread the notice, then slid it beneath the bread box. Bills stacked, filings flew, hurt simmered. But my girl had a plan, a shift, a quarter, and a harbor. "Proceed quietly," I told the dark now. "There's a night the museum's air system fails and Brooke and Kofi haul fans between exhibits like it's relief work. The planetarium fogs with breath. The children's gallery hums like a beehive. They wedge doors, roll cords, borrow box fans from a gift shop stockroom, and tape arrows on the floor so no one trips. At dawn, she comes home smelling of citrus and motor windings, drops her tote, and steps straight into the shower. The water beats a rhythm I used to tap on her crib. She cries there small, angry, alive. I lean against the door and grant her the privacy of baptism, the ordinary mercy of being unobserved. By the time the kettle sings, the sun has decided to be kind. She appears in my doorway wrapped in steam and fatigue, hair braided for truce, not victory. She slides into the chair like a soldier disarming. Over toast, she whispers, "Mom, if we can't fix my name, I'll take whatever job will have me. But I want to be useful, not just busy." I pass her the jam and the steadiness I've been saving. "Useful is a beautiful word," I say, "and mean it." She nods, gathering courage like crumbs. "I applied for a community counseling certificate," she blurts, confession shaped as breath. "I want to help people rebuild. If I ever get clear, I won't waste it." I hold my mug two-handed so I won't reach to fix what pain is finally teaching. Ethical choice time, and not only hers. Revenge glitters like a cheap necklace. A reveal in the tower lobby, an audience of neighbors, the single brutal word owned cutting the air. Justice is slower and less photogenic. It requires me to pull the sheet off the truth in a room with legal pads and witnesses and nowhere to run. I make 2 columns on the back of an envelope, spectacle and settlement. Under spectacle I write shame, applause, regret. Under settlement I write corrections, signatures, peace. My handwriting steadies as if the pen itself prefers mercy. At work she learns the difference between urgent and noisy. The gift shop register fails. Urgency. A spilled blue slush in the dinosaur wing. Noise. Kofi shows her the back hall where the old exhibit labels sleep in boxes and says, "When you feel useless, alphabetize something." She does. She learns the vacuum's temperament, the squeak that means the bag is full and the thunk that means she's swallowed a paper star. During lunch at midnight, she and the other night crew trade recipes for cheap meals and better mornings. Nobody asks about Europe. They talk wrists, backs, and the holy relief of good shoes. I keep the house quiet enough to hear what patience sounds like. I sort screws in an old jar, shine the kettle spout, oil the hinge that tattles. When my hands itch to perform, I write questions instead. What repairs dignity without spectacle? What timing teaches without breaking? Priya calls while I'm scrubbing the sink to a chapel shine. "We can schedule a meeting to present the evidence and the ownership structure," she says, brisk but kind. "If you want the reveal, do it where it changes documents, not just faces." I close my eyes. The sentence clicks into place like a lock catching. "Book it," I say. After the call, I take Len's letter down from its shelf and read the line that still stings. "Protect her from money, even from ours." It isn't a command. It's a covenant. I look up at the ceiling, where steam from her shower has sketched a map of small continents, and I negotiate with time. "Just 1 more week," I tell the plaster. "Let her finish this quarter the way she started it, standing up." Then I put my palm against Len's photo and make my promise out loud. 1 more tide. Then we open the lock. The words settle in the room like ballast. The phone begins its campaign. Unknown numbers bloom like algae. Brooke practices the script Priya drilled. "Brooke Hale Leclerc speaking. My counsel will respond. Please direct all communication to attorney Priya Menon." Then she hangs up before guilt can flower. The first time her hands shake. The second time they tremble less. The third, they simply place the phone face down and reach for the mop. At work, she learns to fix a jammed soap dispenser with a butter knife, to talk a panicked custodian through a breaker reset, to accept a compliment without turning it into a confession. Kofi nods once, which, in his language, is a standing ovation. On Wednesday, the doubt returns like tidewater under a door. She stands in the hallway holding a box of books she doesn't plan to keep and says, "Maybe I should move into a sublet now and fail in private." I take the box, set it on the table, and pour tea because the kettle is our metronome. "Privacy won't make the lesson faster," I tell her. "It will only make it lonelier." She stares into the steam the way people read fortunes. "What if I'm not built for rebuilding?" "Then we'll reinforce," I answer. "Beam by beam, no shortcuts, no grand gestures we can't carry down the stairs." At the grocer, I choose store-brand tomatoes and let the clerk overbag as if weight might split me. I ride the bus and study hands. A mason's cracked knuckles, a nurse's clean nails, a teenager's inked vines. Yolanda waves from her salon window with a comb like a baton, but doesn't cross the street. She knows I'm composing stillness. At home, I copy a sentence from Brooke's breakfast onto an index card. Useful is a beautiful word. I tape it inside the pantry where the flour lives, because hunger teaches faster than lectures. In the evening, I polish the Norton's key on a rag and think, not yet. Friday night, the museum hosts a sleepover. Storms knock power sideways. The emergency lights turn exhibits into saints. A child wakes from a nightmare and mistakes the whale skeleton for a monster. Brooke kneels, shows him her flashlight beam like a ribbon, and says, "It's only old bones learning to float." The boy laughs, the hiccup laugh of relief. Later, she and Kofi ferry mattresses from a storeroom, count heads twice, and coax a vending machine into Mercy with a borrowed quarter. At 4 a.m. She texts me a photo of the planetarium floor, shining like a lake you could drink. I send back a thumbs up and a heart, because sometimes parenting is punctuation. I spend Saturday curating the kind of truth that fits inside binders. I label tabs without flourish, forged instruments, residency emails, ownership, rescission. I refrain from adjectives the way you refrain from salt before a lab test. The watch we didn't sell ticks on the table like a metronome for restraint. I practice saying my sentences without embroidery. Yes, that is my signature. Yes, this is my company. Yes, those dates overlap impossibly. When my mind wanders toward the lobby, spectacle gasps, gossip, satisfaction, I herd it back to the conference room, to chairs that do not applaud, to a window that replaces clapping with horizon. Priya confirms the schedule. 7 days. "I've reserved the large conference room," she says. "Not for intimidation for air. Bring only what we need. I'll carry the rest." I ask about witnesses. "We don't need a crowd," she says. "But an everyday witness can turn a hinge. Yolanda, if she's willing, can attest to timelines without drama." I picture Yolanda's scissors folded like a testimonial and feel a steadiness that doesn't ask for more. "We're not prosecutors," Priya adds. "We're gardeners pulling a weed by the root." I laugh because the metaphor fits in my hands. "Then I'll bring gloves," I say, and she smiles through the line. Late that night, the house dim as a chapel, Brooke finds me folding towels into domestic sermons. "Who am I if no one rescues me?" she asks, not for pity but for definition. I set the towel down and consider the girl who used to label seashells by mood. "You're the person who learns to build a dock," I say, and then offers a rope without jumping in the river. She sinks onto the rug, cross-legged, grown and small at once. "I thought usefulness was a demotion," she admits. "It feels like permission." I reach for her hand. "Permission to grow," I say, "and the best kind of pride earned." When the house finally sleeps, I sit at the kitchen table with the binder stack and a cup of water so cold it tastes like an instruction. I write tomorrow's list in neat capitals. Call Kofi to confirm Brooke's shift swap for meeting day. Print duplicate exhibits. Pack lens watch. Bring tissues. Breathe. I practice my voice, not armor, not apology, just weather moving through. Outside, the inlet exhales, and a tug growls somewhere past the point, faithful as a metronome. I think of the lobby reveal, the public gasp, the sweet, cheap relief, and I let it pass through me like rain through screens. Justice, not theater. Procedure, not performance. "One more tide," I tell the dark again, and then we open. "Len, keep watch. I'll steer quiet until the harbor answers tonight." A week of quiet rally began with lists, binders, and breathing. Priya spread a legal picnic across her conference table, labeling folders in a neat hand. Folder A for forgery evidence, Folder B for Lighthouse Commons ownership, Folder C for rescission orders and the Tower Master lease. "Everything a tide needs," she said, "and nothing a storm can use." Brooke pressed her work pants with the little hotel iron we keep in the linen closet, laughing at herself for remembering a glamour life she no longer wants. At my house, the montage had its own music, printer hum, zipper teeth, the soft click of a 3-ring binder closing. I slid sticky flags along pages the way sailors lay buoys, marking shoals we would cross without drama. Yolanda arrived with combs in her apron and braided my hair like armor, not tight, sure. "Give her a clean mirror," she said. "Not a magnifying glass." I smiled. "She'll see enough either way." Yolanda pinned a stray gray back, nodding at the folders. "And you, Noreen?" "Clean mirror. Not magnifying glass, she repeated, because sometimes counsel is better for echoing. Kofi stopped by carrying surplus museum muffins stacked like little domes. He clapped Brooke on the shoulder with a coach's calm. "You leave floors better than you found them," he said. "Leave your life the same way." Brooke saluted with a muffin wrapper, then pulled up a chair and helped me sort receipts. "I used to think backstage was for the desperate," she murmured. "Turns out it's where the generous work." Priya smiled exactly once that week, when an email landed with the weight of a key. A paralegal had pulled airport timestamps and a hotel geotag. Damien photographed at a visa office across the world while instructing Brooke to sign a wire at the same hour. Priya tapped the screen. "This is your impossible overlap," she told me. "He can't be in two places doing opposite things. A judge will love this." The sentence felt like a dry match finally catching. I tucked the printouts into folder A, as if they were fragile puppies we needed to carry across a road. I packed Len's unsold watch into my purse, not for value for witness. I wanted it ticking on the conference room table like a second heart, proof that time itself was willing to testify. Beside it, I placed tissues, peppermints, and a small notebook with a sentence on the first page: "Preparation is love," with a clock. The days leading up to the meeting behaved like tides: errands out, quiet in. I confirmed Brooke's shift swap with Kofi, who raised 2 fingers like a blessing. Yolanda agreed to sit in the hallway outside Priya's office, if you need an everyday witness, and to bring a travel can of hairspray big enough for courage. I practiced my answers in the mirror, then put the mirror away. "All right then," I told the empty kitchen. "Harbor's calm. Let's launch." Brooke pressed her work pants again, crease sharp as promise, then packed a sandwich, a notebook, a courage she didn't name. "If anyone in that room doubts me," she said, "tell them I have witnesses with mops." I laughed. "We have witnesses with everything," I said, thinking of Yolanda's scissors and Kofi's calm, of Priya's signature like a seal. Morning of the meeting, the inlet wore its good gray. Priya's lobby smelled like paper and rain. She met us at the elevator with a nod that said it was time to put our oars down and ride the current. In the conference room, sunlight laid clean rectangles on the table. She set the binders in a row: folder A, folder B, folder C. "We lead with the forgery," she said. "Then ownership, then procedure. No adjectives." Brooke smiled, a quick flash of teeth. "I brought nouns," she said, and patted her notebook. We rehearsed the choreography. Priya would state facts, slide exhibits, pause so silence could do its modest work. I would answer only the questions asked. Brooke would be visible, dignified, unscared by paper. Yolanda waited outside with a crossword and a thermos, ready to testify that my porch timeline had no gossip gaps. Kofi texted a photo of the planetarium floor, mirrored and bright, captioned, "Leave it better than you found it." I showed Brooke, who touched the screen like a blessing. Then, the missing piece arrived with the casual timing of a late gull. Priya's assistant slipped in, placed a print, and vanished. The page held 2 photographs and a pair of coordinates. Damien at a visa office counter, chin raised toward a camera, time stamped to the minute, a hotel lobby geotag stamped to the same minute across an ocean, attached to his message directing Brooke to authorize a wire. Priya inhaled like a swimmer turning for one more lap, then smiled, the rare kind. "Impossible overlaps make very possible rulings," she said. Brooke looked at me, laughter and sorrow queuing up together. "He really tried to be in 2 places," she murmured. "He tried to be in no place," I said. "Paper found him." We took our seats as if boards had been called. I set Len's watch on the table. Its ticking softened the room's hard edges. My pulse synced to it like a practice duet. Priya opened with a greeting that could have been mailed: professional, spare, unafraid. She summarized without adjectives, then began her slow, careful slide through folder A. Signatures, dates, mismatched locations, the screenshot of the impossible overlap. The story built itself like scaffolding. Brooke kept her hands still, her eyes forward, the set of her mouth not sorry, not smug, just awake. During a pause, Priya nodded to me, an invitation to let truth be ordinary. "I am Noreen Hale," I said. "I manage Lighthouse Commons. We rescinded the cottage sale on grounds of lack of authority and have revested title. The master lease for the tower sits with Lighthouse. The notices issued were standard compliance documents, not personal vendettas. Saying it aloud was like opening a window. The room did not tilt, it simply breathed. Outside, Yolanda sat with her crossword, pencil tapping time. When called, she stepped in and spoke the way good scissors cut clean. "I saw Brooke return with one suitcase," she said. "No husband. I brought coffee, not commentary. She slept, then worked. If you want gossip, there's none. If you want dates, I've brought them." She set her little ledger down, pages stamped with Tuesdays and weather. Then, she looked at Brooke. "Clean mirror, not magnifying glass," she reminded, and left the room smelling faintly of hairspray and courage. The discussion turned to numbers. Debts already paid, hold releases negotiated, the museum shifts marked on a calendar like stitches. Brooke spoke for herself when invited, her voice quiet, grounded. "I can't undo my choices," she said. "I can choose better now." Priya added the letters of the law like stones across a stream. We crossed without wetting our shoes. When the binders closed, there was no applause, only the soft tick of Len's watch carrying the room from one breath to the next. Priya gathered the exhibits with the same care she gives a verdict she already knows is coming. "We'll file before sunset," she said. "Expect relief in phases, not fireworks." Brooke exhaled, and the sound was ordinary, which is to say, beautiful. In the elevator, Yolanda squeezed my hand, then adjusted a non-existent bobby pin. "You held," she said. I nodded, feeling like a dock after a storm still there, a little saltier. Kofi met us outside with muffins that had somehow stayed warm. He looked at Brooke and grinned. "Leave it better than you found it," he said, and somehow the sentence covered both the floor and the future. Brooke bit into a blueberry and laughed like a person discovering breakfast again. Back home, I put the watch in my palm and listened. The ticking was less like a clock now, and more like permission. Brooke hung her blazer and set her notebook next to the fern. "We ate soup too late for lunch and too early for dinner. What if today doesn't fix anything?" she asked. "Then it proves we can tell the truth without breaking," I said, "and that's worth keeping." She took the evening bus to the museum, texted me a photo of the dinosaur wing reflecting a sunset it couldn't see, then added, "Kofi says dignity is a habit." I replied with a picture of the binders stacked like patient birds. Priya pinged, filed, followed by 2 small scales of justice. I set my phone face down and folded towels as if they were arguments put to bed. Later, after dishes, Yolanda stopped by with a paper bag of peaches, for courage. We stood in the doorway, sharing one, juice running down our wrists. "You know what you did today?" she asked. "Picked the lock without breaking the door," I said. "You gave her a future she can face," Yolanda answered. "Clean mirror, not magnifying glass." We ate the last bites over the sink, laughing like teenagers hiding evidence. Night settled like fog that knows the route. I checked locks, watered the fern, and wrote a note for tomorrow. Call Priya. Thank Yolanda. Pack muffins for Kofi. Then I opened the pantry and read the little card I'd taped weeks ago. Preparation is love with a clock. The watch on the table agreed, keeping time like a faithful witness. I set out 2 cups and a tea bag for the morning because optimism likes small proof. Before bed, I texted Brooke. "Proud of your nouns. See you at dawn." She answered with a photo of her clipboard and a single word. Working. I turned off kitchen light, listened to the inlet breathe, and said into the dark, "All right then, harbor's calm. Let's launch." Priya's conference room is all glass and steel, with a harbor I've known my whole life breathing beyond it. The bay is the color of pewter, the ferries cut lines like ruled paper. Brooke sits to my left, eyebrows lifted like she's waiting for a scan to light up red or green. I set Len's watch between us. The second hand ticks with the ordinary courage of a heartbeat. I'm not sure which of us needs it more. Priya enters with calm like a measured tide. She doesn't perform our pain, she stacks it into folders. "We'll begin," she says, voice that could balance a table. She slides folder A across the glass. "Miss Hale Leclerc, these are the documents showing forgery by Mr. Leclerc loan applications, wire instructions, and emails about a sham residency marriage." She turns each page like a metronome. Signatures that don't match, authorizations sent from impossible miles. Screenshots with timestamps bright as sirens. Brooke reads, and I watch her mouth learn the shape of relief. She shuts her eyes once, careful, as if she's placing a fragile cup on a shelf. So I'm not crazy, she says. I was simply convenient. Used, I say softly, then discarded. She nods. Once. And now? Now we clear your name, Priya answers. The sentence lands on the table like a stamped form. Priya slides folder B. The gold of the Lighthouse Commons seal looks almost ceremonial in the morning light. Mrs. Hale asked me to show you the operating agreement of Lighthouse Commons and the master lease for your tower. Brooke looks from paper to me, then back again, as if the words might change if she blinks. I own Lighthouse Commons, I say. Len built it in my name. I rescinded the cottage sale. The Norton is on its way back. The eviction was a business notice, not a punishment. I let it come to you so you'd understand the system you were breaking before it broke you. Something complicated crosses her face. Shock, shame, a flicker of respect that scares me with its brightness. Her mouth opens, then she laughs once, shocked and sane. You mean, through all of this you could have written checks? Yes, I say, but I chose to write lessons. We don't stay saved by someone else's pen. I touch the watch. The second hand agrees. Not faster, truer. Priya slides folder C. With your signature here, we'll file motions to vacate your liability, citing fraud and the impossible overlap. Fees are settled. By who? Brooke whispers, as if cost is a spell that might return us to the beginning. By Lighthouse Commons, Priya says. By me, I correct, smiling without triumph. By the mother who knows you'll choose better if you earn better. Brooke's eyes glass, but for once there's no panic inside the shine. She places the pen on the line as if putting down a weapon. I'm finishing the quarter at the museum, she says. And I want to enroll in the counseling certificate. Choice, not charity, I say, and we clap our palms together once a private gavel. We move through signatures the way levees move water directing, not damming. Priya speaks to the paralegal in that crisp shorthand law invents to keep courage from fraying. Exhibit 12, stamp, Exhibit 14, notarize. Add the airport timestamp to @2. The impossible overlap Damien captured at a visa office across an ocean while instructing Brooke to authorize a wire sits on the top of the stack like an obedient hawk. Dates don't lie. Geography refuses to flatter cowards. Between pages, I let memory walk where it wants. I see Len at the kitchen table, boots unlaced, telling me tides are just clocks that breathe. I see Brooke at 9, practicing introductions in the mirror for a school play. I see the cottage the day we first turned the key, the Norton's chrome winking like mischief. I breathe them in and fold them back into the quiet. Priya closes the final folder with the satisfaction of a drawer that now runs smooth. Next, she says, we serve, we file, we sleep. Relief comes in phases, not fireworks. She turns to Brooke. You'll receive formal confirmation as courts and banks finish their dances. Today was the music. Brooke nods and sets the pen down exactly straight. On impulse, no, on vow, I turn the watch face up so the second hand points at my daughter. Brooke, I say, Len wanted time to be something you wore with respect. She closes her fingers over the table's edge and smiles the way a shore smiles after wind. I will, she says. I already started. We stand. Outside, the harbor is shrugging into noon. Priya gathers the binders. The paralegal clicks the soft click of a stapler doing righteous work. I thank them with the kind of gratitude that doesn't need adjectives. In the hallway, Yolanda rises from a lobby chair with a crossword folded to the finished square. Clean mirror, not magnifying glass, she murmurs, like a benediction. I kiss her cheek. Brooke hugs her, careful, not desperate, and somehow that care is the proof. The elevator lowers us like a ceremony learning humility. We step out into honest air. Kofi is waiting on the curb with surplus muffins wrapped in a towel to keep them warm. He looks at Brooke, then at me. Words aren't necessary, but he offers one anyway. Better. Brooke nods. We split a blueberry at the crosswalk. The light changes. We cross. Life resumes in small rightnesses. Brooke finishes the quarter, no flaking, no late calls, no performance beyond good work. She gets her acceptance to the community counseling certificate with a line about promise demonstrated in adverse conditions. She pinches the bridge of her nose and laughs at the phrasing, then tapes the letter to the refrigerator like a child's drawing. We celebrate with cheap pizza and the museum's orange cleaner still on her hands. Tag. Months tip forward. Priya texts that Damien's sham residency collapsed. Extradition papers hum somewhere between offices, all stamps and sentences. The news lands like weather I don't have to stand in. Brooke and I paint trim at the Harbor House, the river cottage turned short-stay home for women who need a clean bed and a job lead more than pity. The rooms smell of cedar and second chances. We argue gently about shades of white, then pick the one that looks best at dusk. We hang 2 hooks by the door for borrowed coats, line a shelf with mugs that don't match but agree. A clipboard waits for names, a basket waits for keys. A binder waits for the first story that will leave here better than it arrived. I unlock the old window that sticks and remember Len levering it the same way, chuckling, "Every stubborn thing deserves patience." We lock up at dusk. Foghorns tune the evening, gulls scribble parentheses in the sky. Len's watch ticks in my pocket, polite as a psalm. Yolanda waves from the road, holding up a paper sack of peaches like a trophy. Kofi drives past and honks twice, the museum's version of a hymn. Brooke squeezes my paint-spattered fingers. "Mom," she says, smiling like the first good weather after a siege, "I'll leave it better than I found it." "Me too," I answer, and for once there's nothing left to teach. We stand there long enough to memorize the sound of relief. The harbor breathes, the house holds, the watch keeps time without asking for thanks. Behind us, the Harbor House waits with dignity, lights off, doors ready to open for the next person who thinks rescue is a stranger's miracle and learns, instead, that rescue can be a room, a schedule, a job lead, a key in the right palm. I slip my arm through my daughter's and we walk to the truck, quiet and precise, 2 women who learned that harbors are for mooring and for moving, and that the best kind of love does both. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart even a little, that's our greatest joy. If you'd like, please share your thoughts in the comments. We'll keep bringing you stories that stay with you, so please consider subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.